Hey, it's a baptism Sunday. It's one of my favorite Sundays of the year, and we will end our service in that. But today we're going to continue in our series, The Gift of Wondering. I have a question for you. You don't have to raise your hand, but have you ever been in a season of life, a time period of your life where nothing makes sense, right? Like you're questioning everything. Nothing is happening the way that you had thought it was going to, that you had hoped it was going to. You're showing up. You're doing your best. You're being as faithful as you can, but clarity is gone, right? You're just struggling to make sense of the situation. Direction has faded. Maybe it's a time of transition. Maybe you have been in, or maybe you are in a time of what you feel like is unanswered prayers. You're going to God. You're praying continually for the same types of things, and you feel it's unanswered. It's just a time in your life where nothing makes sense. We call this season a season of wandering. Like it just feels a little helpless. It feels like you're a little bit out there on your own and none of it's coming together. Here's the thing about wandering though. Wandering doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're in between where you started and where God is calling you. That's what wandering is. It's not that you're lost. It's in between the place that you began something. God has called you somewhere else. You're not quite there yet, and so you are in between. This is maybe true in your life right now. Maybe you're in between career aspirations and dreams. Your career isn't quite what you had hoped it would be. Maybe this is true in a season of life with your kids. You're at that season of life with your kids where you're going, are you sure they don't have instruction manuals at the hospital? Did we forget those? Can we go back? Right? It's just a season of like, I'm not sure how this is going to play out. Maybe your marriage is not what it was at one point and you're thankful for that, but it's not quite where you want it to be yet. That's a season of wondering. Maybe in your spiritual journey, maybe you've given your life to Jesus, but you're not quite there to a place of maturity yet. You still got some questions and still some doubts. Maybe for you, you're just exploring faith and what giving your life to Jesus would look like. You haven't done that yet. And so it's a season of wondering. And here's the thing, in these in-between places, it's exhausting, isn't it? Like we don't enjoy it. It tests our faith. It stretches us. It's a place that exhausts us. And most dangerously, it's a place that we often feel alone. Right? We feel alone when we are wandering, when we're in these seasons of our life. There's a TV show by that exact name called Alone. Has anybody ever watched this TV show? A few of you? Yes. I love this show. It's an awesome show. And here's the premise, just so if you haven't seen it. Here's the premise. They take usually around 12 contestants. They take them to a place. It's usually in British Columbia somewhere that's going to get really cold on them. They drop them off by themselves. They film themselves. There's no camera crew. Once a week, a medic comes in and does a health test on them to make sure they're okay. Then they leave. They're all alone. That's why they named it Alone. And so they're out there, and they have a satellite phone that they can call and say, I don't want to do this anymore. Now, here's the thing. This isn't like if we took 12 of you and dropped you into the wilderness, okay? That's like 5 hours later. Our phone's going to be ringing off the hook. These are people who know what they're doing. They've got some skills. They've had to pass some tests showing that they know how to survive in the wilderness. And so they go out there with some gear. They've got some equipment. And the goal of it is to just outlast everybody. And you don't know when somebody else has quit. You don't know if there's still 12 people or if it's down to you and one other person. You have no idea. And when we watch the show, I watch it with my kids, I can tell them almost every time when somebody is about to quit. And it's never because they're hungry. It's never because they're sheltered. They have built some amazing shelters, like places that I'd be like, I would live in that. If there's a fireplace in there, there's a bed, there's a bookshelf. They built some amazing shelters. Here's how I know when they are about to quit. They begin talking a lot about their family. They begin talking about their wife, their kids. I wonder what they're doing. Oh, I miss them so much. And here's what makes them leave most of the time. It's not the food. It's not the shelter. It's not the cold. They don't want to be alone any longer. They can't take it. They don't want to be alone. And I think this is true of us. Now, I get it. There's some of you who are introverts. And you're like, Michael, being alone sounds amazing. I understand that. People are not your thing. But I would say to you that even you, if you're an introvert, still have a desire for relationships. I know this is true about you because God created us as relational beings. And you are not the exception to how He created us. All of us. Now, you may not need the whole party, okay? You may need one person to hang out with. But all of us need relationships. And in our wondering, God has not left us without a compass. He often gives us a compass through other people, through our relationships, to hold us up, to speak life into us, to remind us of who we are and what God has promised. Which brings us to the story we're going to look at today in 1 Samuel 23. If you have a Bible, I'd love for you to turn there. As always, there's some out by our giving kiosk. That's our gift to you. You can grab one on your way out. But we're going to look at a man by the name of David. Now, David, the story of his life has so many layers to it. He lived a full life. And the part we're going to look at is in the middle of his life, and it's a season of him wandering. And if you know anything about David, you probably know that he was king, and you probably know, I'm familiar with, I've heard the story of David killing Goliath. And both of those things are true. But here's the thing about those moments in his life. Those are mountaintop experiences. Like, those are good days. I've never been made king, but the day you put the crown on and sit down in the throne, it's probably a good day. You're king. The day you kill the giant that everybody is scared of, that's probably a good day. That's a mountaintop experience. But what's true in his life is true in ours. Surrender to God doesn't mean we live on the mountaintop. Like, that's just a reality. I don't want you to ever hear me say, hey, if you give your life to Jesus, man, you're just going to jump from mountaintop to mountaintop to mountaintop. That's not true. And you know that's not true. If you're a follower of Jesus, you have still spent time in the valley. You have still spent time in the wilderness. Maybe right now you would say, yeah, that's where I'm at this moment. And it's not a place that you want to be, and yet there you are. And if this is the case, if we know as followers of Jesus that we are going to go through the valley, and honestly, this is helpful. Even if you're not a follower of Jesus, what we're going to talk about today, I think, is helpful to you. If we know we don't live from mountaintop to mountaintop, but that the valleys and wandering is part of our life, if something could help us in those seasons, if there's something in our lives that could help bring us through those, we should learn to apply it. And the good news is we see some lessons, a specific lesson in the life of David. And here's the thing about this lesson. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple lesson. It's not a laundry list of things to do and not do. It's really a simple lesson that all of us can do. We can get this. We just have to choose to do it. And so before we dive into our text today, I'm going to give you a little background, a little intro to David. We're introduced to him as a young boy. He's around the age of 15, and he is a shepherd for his family. He's got several older brothers, and he's the youngest. He's the shepherd out on the family farm. That's where we're introduced to him. At the same time, there's a man by the name of Saul, who is the first king of Israel. Israel becomes a nation. They see the other nations around them all have kings, and they say, hey, if they have kings, we should have a king. And so they want a king, and this is literally how they decide who's going to be the king. Somebody says, we should have a king. Somebody else says, I know a guy named Saul. He's really tall. And they're like, that sounds good. Let's make him king. I've never been on the board to nominate a king, but I don't feel like that would even come up, really, if you're trying to do it the right way. But that's how they do it. They're like, hey, this guy's tall. Let's make him king. And not shocking to any of us today, he wasn't very good at being king because his only qualification was, I'm taller than the other guys around me. So if you're ever appointing king, throw that one out. That's not the reason to make him king. So he's not a good king. And Israel begins to discover that. Now, at this time, Israel does not have what we have as God's word. They don't have the full Bible that they are instructed by. They have parts of it. They don't have all of it as we do. And so the way that Israel is led is they had men and women who were prophets. And these prophets would go to them, not in a what we may think of like, hey, I'm telling the future type of thing, but they would go to them, they would spend time with God, and they would go to Israel, and they would tell them what God has told the prophet that Israel should do, how they should behave, how they should live. So that's how they would communicate with God. And at this time, a prophet by the name of Samuel goes to David's home. Saul is still king. It's not working out. Samuel goes to David's home, finds David, anoints him with oil to be the next king. David's like 15 years old, and he gets anointed to be king. And so Saul is not super happy about this. And during this time, from when he's anointed, David goes on to do some pretty amazing things. This is when he goes and kills Goliath. Goliath had been teasing Israel, saying, hey, send out a great warrior. They were all scared. David goes and kills him, and he begins to be famous. Like the ladies hear about this, and they're like, hey, we like David, man. He's killing Goliath. And Saul begins to be jealous. He is recognized everywhere he goes, and Saul doesn't like it because Saul likes being king. He wants to stay king. And so if you're king and somebody else gets anointed to be the next king, and you don't want him to be king, do you know what you do? I know it's church. You can say it. You kill them. That's exactly right. You have them killed. And nobody would have questioned, he's the king, he could have done that. And that's exactly what Saul begins to try to do. He is hunting David down, trying to kill him. And it's kind of, it's funny to me because I'm not David. It probably wasn't funny to David. But at the time, Saul would try to kill him. He would be in a room with him and throw a spear at him, try to kill him. He would miss, and David would run away. And then Saul would send a messenger to David and be like, hey, Saul said he's sorry. He was just having a bad day. He didn't mean it. Why don't you come back to the palace? Like, this happens over and over again. And to David's credit, I think he feels the same way we do. He's like, hey, thanks for the invitation, but I'll pass. Like, that's the fourth time he's tried to kill me. I'm starting to think this isn't an accident, And so he says, no, I'm not going to go back to the palace. And so David lives this period of his life on the run, going from place to place, and it's not fun. It's a challenge for him. He's been a warrior. He's been fighting against other nations that are against Israel. So he can't go to those lands and live there. They want to kill him. He can't stay in Israel because the king of Israel, Saul, wants to kill him. And so in this in-between time, he continues to do what he knows is right. He continues fighting these other nations. Really, Saul should have been doing this as well. But he's got no place that he could call home. And so that's what we're going to pick up here in 1 Samuel 23, verse 13. It says this. So David and his men, numbering about 600, left Keilah at once and moved from place to place. They were in Keilah because they were fighting the Philistines. They were doing what Saul should have been doing. When it was reported to Saul that David had escaped from Keilah, he called off the expedition. So he had people there trying to find David to kill him. David then stayed in the wilderness strongholds and in the hill country of the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul searched for him every day. But God did not hand David over to him. And maybe you can relate a little bit to David in this. David is out doing what he's supposed to be doing. He is fighting the bad guys because that's what God has led him to do. But he's also being hunted by his own nation. And maybe you've felt this way before, that you are doing what's right and it's just not working. Like you are doing what you're supposed to do, what God has told you to do, but you also find yourself very discouraged in the middle of doing it. You ever been there? Where you're trying your best. You are living the life that you believe God is saying. You are listening to Him. You are in His Word. You are obeying His Word. You're parenting the way you should parent. You're going about your relationship with your spouse the way that you believe God is telling you. You are following in your daily life, and yet you still feel like you are wandering. And in these moments of frustration and in these moments of doubt, we are tempted to stop obeying. We're tempted to stop trusting because we don't want to be in this season any longer. We get tired of it. And here's a lie that Satan tries to convince us when we're in a place like David, when we're in the wilderness, when we're wandering. A lie we're all tempted to believe is that getting out is better than going through. Satan will begin to tempt us. Hey, whatever you need to do to get out of this wandering, to get out of this season of wilderness, do whatever you need to do to get out of it. When our obedience doesn't produce results, we are tempted to give up. But this is an absolute lie. It's in seasons of wandering where we're still being obedient. That when we go through them, not try to get out of them, that we learn and that we grow. Like we talked about last week, our faith is deepened. Because going through them isn't easy, right? Our faith is deepened in the desert, but it's not easy going through them. We see in David's story next what we need in our life in verse 15. David was in the wilderness of Ziph of Horesh, and when he saw that Saul had come out to take his life. And then Saul's son Jonathan came to David in Horesh and encouraged him in his faith in God, saying, "Don't be afraid, for my father Saul will never lay a hand on you. You yourself will be king over Israel, and I'll be your second in command. Even my father Saul knows it's true." And then the two of them made a covenant in the Lord's presence, and afterward David remained in Horesh while Jonathan went home. If you don't know who Jonathan is, it tells us there in the verse, he is the son of Saul. He is the oldest son, the one who is trying to kill David. David and Jonathan become best friends, but Jonathan's dad is trying to murder David. I've never experienced that with any of my friendships, but I'm guessing David and Jonathan didn't have a whole lot of, video games in the basement at Jonathan's house. That's tough to do when the dude's dad is trying to kill you. Here's what I love in this story, though, is if we wrote this story, we wouldn't make it up, especially in this time, we wouldn't make it up this way. We would not make them two friends with each other. Because do you know who was next in line to be king after Saul died? Jonathan. Jonathan was going to be king. Like, that's how it worked back then. And so it made a lot of sense for Jonathan to be like, yeah, Dad, go get him. Go get him. It made sense for Jonathan to want that to happen. But the cool part about the story is that God flipped how things normally go upside down. Instead of Jonathan being an enemy, he's now his best friend, which is a reminder to us in the middle of our wandering, in the middle of our wilderness, that God's ways are not limited to our ways. In your life, in your darkest day, in your desert, in your wilderness, God's ways are not limited to your ways. And I'm really thankful that God doesn't have to operate in the box that I understand, the box that I live in. He doesn't have to love the way that I understand love. He doesn't have to provide the way that I understand provision. I'm so thankful in my wilderness that God isn't limited to what he does to only the things that I understand. And in David's case, this is so important because God is not limited to that box. It allowed him to create a friendship between David and Jonathan that David would have never imagined. Nobody in that kingdom would have ever imagined that these two would be friends. And so David learns and he shows us what we need to know about successfully making it through wandering is this: you don't have to wander alone. Now, I hope you hear me say that. You don't have to wander alone. You are going to wander. You're going to go through seasons of the desert, of the valley, but you don't have to wander alone. You only wander alone if you choose to. And why would we ever do that? Because one of the gifts we have in wandering is that we get to depend on others. That's a gift that God gives us. It's a reminder that we don't have it all figured out. We aren't the best thing in the universe, and we need other people. And David and Jonathan are unified. They're united in trusting God. Their relationship is centered on God. They are allowed to be what they need to be for each other. They're not going through a wilderness alone because of God being at the center. Now, please hear me say this. That they weren't unified because they both liked sports. They weren't unified because, neither one of them cheered for the Giants. That's a joke. If you think about it later, you'll get it. They weren't unified because they golfed together, or they shopped together, or they read the same books. Those things may have happened, and those are good things. But what they were unified on, the reason their friendship was what it was, is because it was founded on their trust in God. And so we will now see what a person does while they wander. We'll see in David's relationship that type of friendship and how it plays out. Continuing on in verse 15, it says he goes into the wilderness. Saul had come to take his life. And then it says Saul's son Jonathan did what? Came to David. He came to him. You might be going through it right now. So was David. Like, I don't want us to miss, this is a cute story. Oh, he was in the wilderness. It must have been hot. Like, he is nowhere to live. He has nowhere to go. He is hiding out in caves, and the current king is trying to kill him. So he understands something about wandering. David understands something about questioning God's plan. David understands asking the question, is this ever going to end? Will this ever be different? And then he has a friend, not a distant friend, but a friend that came to him, a friend that left the palace and went into the wilderness because he was in need. And that's true about us. When a friendship is founded on trusting God, they will leave the palace to reach the friend in the wilderness. It would have been really easy for Jonathan to stay where he was comfortable and just hoped that his friend was okay. It would have been easy for Jonathan to stay where he was comfortable and send a messenger that said, hey, Jonathan hopes everything works out, right? It would have been easy for Jonathan to put him on the temple prayer list, and once a week you get, hey, don't forget David. He's still out in the cave. We need to pray for him. He could have posted him on social media. Hey, this is my good buddy. He's going through some stuff, if y'all could remember him. He could have done all of those things. But that's not what he did. He went to David. Now, he didn't stay in the wilderness. This was not Jonathan's wilderness. This wasn't God calling him to the wilderness. He doesn't stay there, but he does go and visit with him. He went to him. He was present with him. He let David know that he was there for him. And when we're in a wilderness, we get an opportunity to depend on others to come and be with us. And then look what it says. Then Saul's son Jonathan came to David in Horesh and encouraged him in his faith in God. This is huge. I don't want you to miss this. Jonathan didn't just come sit with him and worry about what was going on and then get spun up with him, although I'm sure that would have been easy to do. You know that type of friend that like, hey, if you're mad at somebody, they're mad at somebody. They don't even know the details. They're like, hey, I got a tire iron in the car. We can go handle this right now, you know? Like that type of friend. The friend that, you know, something happened in your life and you're struggling with it and they're upset about it just because you're upset about it. And we need friends like that. We need friends who sometimes have our back. But when a friendship goes to the next level, it's because a friend can speak into our life. And Jonathan came to David not to pout, not to worry. He came to encourage him, to lift him up. But he did it in a very, very specific way. He encouraged David's faith in God. And when a friendship is founded on God, they will encourage you to trust God more, not less. When you have the right friendship, that person that you are close with, they will encourage you to trust God more, not less. Jonathan didn't come to solve all his problems. He didn't show up and say, hey, I've got a 3-step plan that's going to solve this. He didn't come and say, hey, I know this cave's not bad, but I found a better cave for you to be in. He didn't show up with any answers. But he did know that his friend needed to be reminded who God is and what God's promises are. And so look what he tells David. He says to him, don't be afraid, for my father Saul will never lay a hand on you. You yourself will be king over Israel, and I'll be your second command. Even my father Saul knows it's true. You see what he did here? He didn't solve anything. He didn't tell him how this was going to work out. He didn't tell him when this was going to take place. He didn't tell him all the things that may be happening behind the scenes that David didn't know. He just reminded him of what was true. And a friendship founded on God will remind you of what is true. It's so important in our life, especially in our seasons of wondering. Because in our seasons of wondering, we are terrible at telling ourselves the truth, aren't we? We think this is never going to end. We think this is the worst it could possibly be. We think, hey, they've got it easy. I've got it bad. We think I've messed up too much. God could never redeem this. We think this is never going to work out. This is never going to be over. We need a person in our life who can speak truth and not speak your truth and not speak their truth. I'm going to burst your bubble here maybe today. That doesn't exist. There's no such thing as your truth or my truth. There is only the truth. And we need somebody to come speak that to us. That's why biblical community is so important. It's important because there's seasons in our life when we are going to depend on it. As a pastor of a church, I rarely get the phone call or email that says, hey, just checking in, life's great. See you next week. That doesn't happen a whole lot. Usually I get the call, my marriage is falling apart, my health is bad, I lost my dad, something's terrible going on, and I need help. And one of my first questions is, are you in a community group? When's the last time you've been here to church? Not because we're putting stars on a board somewhere, whether you're here or in a community group. That's not why. But it's because I know that when we go through seasons of our life, that's the darkest days, we need people. And the only way people can know you is if they know you. Now, you got to be around. They got to know what's going on in your life. They got to know what you're walking through. And if we wait for tragedy, if we wait for darkness, if we wait for the wilderness, and then say, I need help, it's really difficult then to have the help that we need. We need those people in our lives through biblical community so that we have friends who show up, who encourage us, who pray with us, who remind us of what is true. And we receive a gift of deeper friendships because really, friendships deepen in our wondering. That's when it deepens. Listen, I hope you got buddies that you golf with and that you hunt with and that you shop with and you read with and you craft, whatever it is. I hope that you have those. But if that's the only time they are around, this is not the type of friendship that David and Jonathan had. If they're not around when you are going through it, if you're not around when they are going through it, then your relationship has never deepened. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be a part of your life. I'm just saying don't confuse the person who's around when things are good with the deep kind of friendship you need to help carry you through the valley. David and Jonathan were united in what God was doing, and that allowed them to be this kind of friendship. And here's the thing. David knew that he had been called. He had been anointed to be king. Like he knew that had happened in his life. And he had seen God work. He had seen God firsthand do some amazing things. But before David became king, it was 15 years after he was anointed king. Before he becomes king, before God gives him a palace, he gives him years in caves, in isolation, and betrayal, and uncertainty. And David spends a significant portion of his life wandering, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, on the run from a king who wanted to kill him, unsure of what is next. And I'm sure David is wondering, when is this going to be over? God, like you promised that I was going to be king, and I'm still, this is year 7 in a cave. When will God's promises come to pass? And in our dark seasons, in David's dark season, God gave him a gift. It's not the gift we would have given him. He doesn't give him the gift of a throne. That's how we would have solved his problem. It's like, well, let's get rid of Saul and then you can be king. And I mean, after all, God anointed you king, so that will solve your problem. That's not the gift that God gives him. He doesn't give him a weapon. He doesn't even give him a safe place to rest. Do you know what gift he gives him? A friend. He gives him Jonathan, the most unsuspecting friend, the friend none of us would have picked for David to have as a friend. The son of the man hunting him down became the friend that helped David when everything else was falling apart. And he did it by being there with him, reminding him of God's calling, speaking life over him when the shadows tried to settle in. And so here's the truth, that wandering should never be wasted. We should never waste our wandering. God often does his deepest work in our most uncertain seasons. But he never designed us to wander alone. He's never designed us to go through the wilderness to wander alone. And I would suspect in a room this size, some of you are like David right now. Man, you feel like you have been in the cave for a minute. And you'd really like to be out. You would really like to get through it. You're unsure of where God is taking you next. You know he is calling you, but you're kind of questioning the timeline. You would kind of do things a little bit different. You've got heart, but you're losing strength. And maybe today, God's reminder to you isn't just endurance, it's community. That you're not meant to go through this season alone. Who has God placed in your life to walk with you? But maybe you're here today, and maybe a better question for you is, who are you called to be a Jonathan for? Who are you called to leave the mountaintop that you're on right now and walk down into the valley, even though it may not be your valley to go all the way through, but it's to meet with somebody to call them to remember who God is and God's promises. Because sometimes we're the one in the cave, and sometimes we're the one who's called to show up to somebody else's wilderness. God often speaks through our friends and strengthens us through community and anchors us through relationships. So today, my encouragement for all of us, this is not something I'm naturally good at. For all of us, it's to stop pretending that we are fine on our own and we got this. We don't have this. We are in desperate need of godly relationship to help us. We need to invite people into the cave with us. We need to be bold enough to ask for help and humble enough to offer help when others are wandering, because the road is long sometimes. The wandering seems like it's never ending, but we don't have to go through it alone. And if we will refuse to wander alone, God will use our desert. He will use our valley. He will use our wandering to give us deeper, life-giving relationships that will be with us no matter what we go through. Let me leave you with a couple of questions to think about. Here's the first one. Why do you often wander alone? Why do I often wander alone? We've got a million excuses. I've got a million excuses. And you just be honest with all of us, you and me included, none of them are valid. None of us are the exception to needing relationships. We need others. Iron sharpens iron. We are created to walk in fellowship with others. Others who are united in their obedience and their trust in God. Those are the ones we need. And we can't wait until things are bad. We need those friendships when things are going well so they can understand us better when things are going bad. Why do you often wander alone? And here's the second question. Who can you be a Jonathan for? It doesn't matter where you're at in life. Somebody needs you. Did you know that? Somebody needs you. Somebody needs you to speak into their life. Somebody needs you to give wisdom. Somebody needs you to put an arm around them and say, hey, I've been there, man. Somebody needs you to just listen to them. Somebody just needs you to come sit down in the cave and sit beside them. Somebody needs you to be a Jonathan. It doesn't matter how sharp you are. It doesn't matter if you know everything or nothing about God's word. Somebody needs you to be a Jonathan to them. We have to be willing to leave the palace and go be a Jonathan to somebody. Who can you be a Jonathan for? Let me pray. God, we love you and thank you for this amazing story about friendship, about relationships. God, before we talk about our friendships and our need to have somebody with us in the valley, I pray for anyone here today who has never given their life to you. The greatest example of somebody leaving the palace and coming to the valley is Jesus leaving heaven and coming to earth to die for us, to rescue us, to walk alongside us in our humanity, to suffer with us. So God, today I pray that if anyone has not given their life to you, that they would confess that they are a sinner, as we all are, and that they believe Jesus died on the cross and rose again, defeating the punishment for sin, which was death. And when we trust in Jesus, we can stand before God, our Heavenly Father, our Creator, as righteous because of the work of Jesus. I pray today that they would accept that relationship first. And then for those who have already made that decision, God, whether we are David or Jonathan right now, I pray that we would understand the need for this type of deepened relationship, that a gift you give us in our wandering is a deeper relationship with other believers. And so I pray that we would prioritize reaching out for help, and we would prioritize going to those who are in need, that you would help us find and nurture those types of relationships so that we don't have to walk through the valleys and the wilderness alone. We love you and we thank you for who you are. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.